is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins. Here with me is my co-host, Michael Riedel of the New York Daily News.
Mere Mortals is a collection of wacky one-act plays at the John Houseman Theater that won a lot of rave reviews here. And here to discuss it is the playwright David Ives, that maestro of the miniature, as they say. David, welcome to Theater Talk.
Thank you, Mr. Riedel.
Now, critics have described your sense of humor as loopy, as wacky, as offbeat, as off-center. How would you describe it? How would you explain to someone what Mere Mortals is about?
It's easier if you've seen All in the Timing, which was
your first collection.
The first collection of one acts, which was 3 years ago, it is the sibling, the Siamese twin, the sideshow Siamese twin to All in the Timing. It's 6 one-act comedies which do everything from show what happens when 2 mayflies go out on a date and realize they only have the rest of the night to live and that they better live it up, to a men's group which is gathered to discuss David Mamet and hail him for his testosterone-filled plays.
That's one of my
And
favorites.
a man who goes to a psychic healer in a strange Central American country. And so what my sense of humor is like, I can only let the critics describe because I have no idea what it is myself.
Well, how do you, sitting around thinking about, I'm going to write a play, how do you come up with the idea, I'm going to write a play about mayflies on their first date, their first and only last date?
I should actually mention as a sidebar that I wrote that particular play on my honeymoon. So I was collecting material as
your
I
marriage
was
short-lived?
Very
blissful. I see. Yeah.
Wow, right.
Well, doctor, I actually wrote that as a. I wrote a little 5-page skit a few years ago, which I threw into my drawer, which is actually how a lot of these things happen. And I don't quite remember where I got that idea, but like most things, it probably came from sitting down over coffee and reading the New York Times in the morning in the science section or something. But I wrote that little play, and I didn't much care for it, and so I threw it in the trunk. And when we were putting Mere Mortals together, the evening of Mere Mortals, I had a play that just was not working, that I couldn't get to work, and we were about a month and a half away from starting rehearsal, and I told the director about this old skit that I had written called Time Flies, and he said, that sounds like the play we're looking for. So every morning on my honeymoon, I would write for a few hours while my blushing bride went down to the pool, and I'd work on it. When I came back, we read it, we said that's it, and that's kind of how it happened.
Here for some music, I've got the Beatles, the Birds, the Crickets.
I love the Crickets.
Well, so do I.
Are you going out with any other? Are there any other mayflies in the neighborhood?
No, it's mostly wasps.
The plays in Mere Mortals, were they other ones that you had sort of dabbled with before and put in a drawer, or did you come up with some new ones to put together as an evening?
There are 2 new ones in the evening. 4 of them have been done before, back at the Manhattan Punchline. There were a couple at the Punchline. There was one at EST a couple of years ago. And so I put in 2 new ones, one of which I wrote for a particular performer in the show, Nancy Opel, Dr. Fritz, the one about the faith.
Who then left your show because you got a Broadway gig.
Yeah, how do you like
Yeah,
that?
that
How do you
great.
like that?
I'm curious, David, when you're putting together an evening of short plays, one acts, do you, though, have a sense of any kind of theme to link them together, or a sense of structure for the flow of the entire evening? Is that something that you think
that was
a lot
much
about?
that was certainly much on our minds when we put it together, but we didn't really know how to put it together until we had the pieces in our hands, and then the director and I sort of moved them around so that 2 plays didn't collide that were too alike. For example, there are a couple of plays that are about dating. There's one that takes place on a miniature golf course, and there's one that's the Mayflies play. Those 2 plays obviously couldn't go together, and so actually we opened previews. It was quite a learning experience. We started previews with the second act in a completely different order that just didn't work, and so we moved each of them around to a different place, and suddenly it fell into position. Thank God for previews, that's what they're for.
Right. Is there, I mean, I don't want to ask you to be a critic, since that's not something you
Oh
want
my
to,
God, don't scare me.
But when you look at the whole evening, I mean, is there a kind of David Ives theme, any point of view, way of looking at the world that you're trying to get across in these collections of plays?
I just try to be funny, really.
I want to make some money and
make money.
Off Broadway. Yeah.
Off Broadway, yes. I work in a gas station in Sag Harbor, and my days off. I have to say that I don't look for that sort of thing when I'm writing. I write to amuse myself and my friends, and when I feel like I've accomplished that, then I think I have something. But I throw away more plays than I ever finish, and I have to. It's hard for me to know what these themes are to these evenings, because I try for every play to be a little different from the one that went before it, and so there's a kind of smorgasbord quality to the evening that's something that I like, for one thing. But we only kind of see the themes when we gather these evenings together. I had no idea when All in the Timing happened that there was so much about language until suddenly it was there. It's just like, I had no idea that there was sort of so much about mortality until in this evening, until my director pointed out, even though the title is Mere Mortals. Yeah, I hadn't been paying attention up till then. Right. By the way, David, it's called Mere Mortals. Strange,
Susan, you had a question.
Well, David, we always wanted to get you on the show. You were on our show about 3 years ago when All in the Timing opened.
Right.
And you said to me you didn't like to do television because you felt that this kind of interview interfered with your writing process, which I found so interesting.
Did I say that?
Yes, you did.
Are you sure it was me?
That's why we're making this a short interview to go with your short writing.
Thank you. Actually, I think that what I said was that I didn't like to do interviews before when a play was in rehearsal or before it had opened, because I have been, I won't say by whom, not by you guys, but I have been quoted against myself by speaking about a show before it opened, and then having a critic pick up something I had said and use
the word against you.
Use it against me. And I hated that so much. It was used so viciously.
Who did it?
I will not speak the
Coward.
person's name.
Coward.
They're still out there. They're still carrying their Black & Decker tools waiting for me. But that taught me just not to speak until it was out there and people sort of knew what it was. And I have to say that after All in the Timing, I was constantly sort of doing things like this, and I don't think that it's very good for you, frankly. I mean, I have turned down lots of interviews, I have to say, just because I get tired of hearing myself say the same thing. But I also think that it gives you an idea of yourself that's just not helpful in a certain way.
I do want to ask you, get your response to this. Peter Marks, the drama critic from the New York Times, gave you a terrific...
I've heard of him.
Yes, right.
I have not read that review.
A minor figure on the theatrical scene. Oh, you have not read a review?
I have not. No, I stopped reading reviews of my plays a couple of years ago, actually, because I found that wasn't very good.
That was getting in the...
It gets in your way. I will quote myself and say that there should be Surgeons General's warnings on all reviews, because the good ones turn your head and the bad ones break your heart. And I found, again, after All in the Timing, that it gets in your way to know what people are saying about you. And so to write innocently is something that I did for so many years that I am
when you
very
were a
much...
struggling playwright.
You're always a struggling playwright as far as you're a young playwright until you're 65 and you're a struggling playwright forever. But I just find that I prefer to write innocently, and so I haven't read any of the reviews on Mere Mortals, which I hear were...
Well, the Peter Marks review, I want to extend.
Oh, no, so we have to extend to destroy his innocence?
Right. We're going to extend here.
Oh, here we go.
Go ahead.
All right.
I'll close my...
Yeah.
Get those figures out here.
Okay.
Well, of course, the Peter Marks review was pretty much a rave, which is why you are running at the John Hassman Theater now. He did, however, say something in the review that I want to read to you and get your reaction to. He first of all praises your first collection of one acts, All in the Timing. Then he says his subsequent full-length plays, including the flat and cryptic Red Address at Second Stage early this season, failed to show off his skills to best advantage. Mere Mortals demonstrates that Mr. Ives' gift may be for riffing rather than ruminating. Is that a fair comment? Are you more comfortable writing
I'm so sorry to have heard
plays?
that. You've
you glad
destroyed me.
Raphael-
You've destroyed me.
You'll
Did you
never-
say he liked me? Hello, Peter Marks. Thank you for saying that.
Accents right
Let
there,
me
making
riff
it.
for a second on that. or shall I ruminate on that? Turn down the volume. I'm about to explode. Yes.
The point, though, is that you've
You
had
told me you weren't going to ask me any questions I didn't want to answer.
you've had success with the short plays. The longer ones you've tried, at least in Peter Marks' estimation, have not been as successful. Are you more comfortable writing smaller plays, or are you capable of writing a big old 3-act play like Long Day's Journey into Night or something?
I think that critics often speak of plays in terms of how the critics have received them. And I will, for example, it was interesting when I was reading the obituary on V.S. Pritchett, when, he had a great big, beautiful obit in the Times. And whoever wrote the obit mentioned that when he wrote a few novels in his 20s or 30s, and went on to say that they were not critically well received. And I thought, but are they good? Are they? It doesn't. What does it matter what the critics said? And so, critics. Yes, those plays were not well received.
The full-length plays.
The full-length plays by certain critics. But I had one play which was well received by audiences and was supposed to move, closed by a review. And so
Which play was that?
I don't
Don
even know.
Juan
Don Juan in Chicago was closed by one bad review as we were poised to move that play. Mm-hmm. And I still have people that stop me in the street and say, "Did you write Don Juan in Chicago?" And it just breaks my heart to hear that, because we had a good production which was unfortunately hurt because the critics said it wasn't all in the timing. And the whole question of critics is just so knotty for a playwright. And so my first response to that quote is that I think that those are quite good plays. And when you talk about the cryptic, whatever it was, red address.
Flat, I think was the...
Cryptic and flat red address, the most disastrous experience I've ever had in putting up a play in the theater. I mean, I continued to deceive myself in thinking that was a good play, but we had, it was living hell putting that show up, because we couldn't find a director for it, and we had problems with the set. It was just a nightmare, so that by the time it finally went up, it was just a horrendous experience. And so to speak about the virtues or failings of that play is not... Critics often speak of what they see as if it's the play, and when there are production qualities that may have gotten in the way. So I don't know.
Just to
the
wrap...
question is, can I...
Can you... I do want to... I mean, are you comfortable writing the full-length plays?
Let me put it this way. After the way the critics have treated me on full-length plays, I would prefer to continue to write short plays, just because I feel like they are ready. It's easy. The easiest thing in the world for them is to say, David Ives writes good one-act plays.
Too bad he can't sustain it for a full evening.
Yeah, so, why should I succumb to, their prejudices? So, yes, I'm probably going to continue to write one-act plays, I guess, is the short answer to that. But one just never knows when one is going into a production, and I'm speaking apart from the virtues or failings of a play, how that production is going to work out. And so I was very fond of those full-length plays, and if the critics didn't like them, that's too bad. The audiences do, or the audiences did.
Well, critics and audiences like Mere Mortals,
Oh,
which
thank you.
is running at the John Houseman Theater. And David Ives, thanks for being our guest tonight on Theater Talk.
Thanks very much.
When Pigs Fly is a very funny, very campy off-Broadway review at the Douglas Fairbanks Theater, and here to tell us about it is one of its creators, Mark Waldrop. Mark, welcome to Theater Talk.
Thank you very much.
Now, Mark, all day long I was racking my brains thinking of a way to describe to people what When Pigs Fly is, and I couldn't come up with a way to do it, so I'm going to push that responsibility off on you. Can you tell us exactly what When Pigs Fly is?
Well, it is a review. I think it's a return to what I call the classic review form, which for me is like New Faces of 1952, or the whole New Faces series. It's a grab bag of songs and sketches with some running jokes that go through it, and then it's just strung along on a little thread of a story. In this case, it's the story about our costume designer, Howard Crabtree, who is also the title character.
And the creator of it with you.
And my co-creator.
And we should say that Howard Crabtree is no longer with us. He died...
He died shortly before the show opened, actually.
Of AIDS?
Yes, just after completing his work on the costumes. Thank goodness.
Isn't it true that, the story is that he was quite ill, but that he sort of kept himself going?
He absolutely did. That's absolutely true. I know that he hung on so that he could finish his work, because I think he knew this was going to be his farewell gesture and his breakout hit. It was certainly what we had hoped for, and it's turned out to be all that and more, which is a wonderful thing.
Into your second year now at the Fairbanks.
Yes.
I'm sorry that we interrupted you in describing it for us. Don't forget to tell us about the costumes, because they really are the thing that one remembers most from the evening.
Right. Well, it's created as a vehicle for costumes, because that's Howard's unique talent, you know. And the little thread of story is about, we start with a prologue that has Howard with his high school guidance counselor, and he tells her how he rejects her mundane career suggestions and says he wants to sing and dance and make funny costumes and put on shows. And he says, do you think I can do that? And she says, yeah, you can do that. When Pigs Fly. And that's where the title of the show comes from. And then we get into the show, and the show is just a variety show. But periodically throughout the evening, things go awry because Howard's vision for the evening is oversized, and the ghost of his guidance counselor comes back to haunt him and make him feel like maybe I did go too far, maybe I shouldn't have attempted this. And at the end of the show, he has a sort of an epiphany and a showdown with that negative voice, and he triumphs.
Now, Mark, it's a very campy show and a very gay show, but you have been running for a year, and we all know in this business you really can't run forever on only gay audiences. So I assume that your show is attracting variety of people in to see it. Is that the case? Have you found that to be?
Absolutely. Let me just say this. Walter Cronkite was there this week. We've had...
What are you saying about Walter Cronkite?
I just think he's the most mainstream, comfortable guy you could ever have.
What do you think its appeal is, and why do you think you can break out of sort of the gay ghetto that a lot of gay-themed shows get stuck in?
Well, I'll tell you why. First of all, it's a very smart show. It's very funny, it's very campy, it has all that wonderful element of what gay people do to entertain each other, and it's expressed largely through the costumes. But it's smart, and it's also sweet. There's nothing offensive in the show.
It's not making a big political statement a la Angels in America or something like that.
Well, it has its little statement to make, but the statement is mostly about hanging on to your dreams.
Right, being yourself.
Being yourself, not letting anyone tell you you shouldn't be yourself, and that's a message that really cuts across all lines. Mm-hmm. I say that When Pigs Fly is no more only for a gay audience than Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk is only for a black audience, or Rent is only for an audience under 30.
When you market the show, when you have your advertising campaign, how do you get beyond just conveying that it's a campy, fun, gay show? Do you try to do that to get in other people, to broaden the audience?
Well, it's a delicate thing, you know. It's because a lot of people will be immediately scared off by the idea that it's a gay show. I think what's happened to us now in our business into our second year is actually picking up, and we are experiencing a much bigger attendance from the mainstream audience. I think people are not only reading great quotes from the critics in the ads and seeing that we've won all these awards, but they're hearing from their friends.
Tell us a little bit about Howard Crabtree, because I don't mean to take away your contribution from the show, but it is Howard Crabtree's When Pigs Fly, and it
I'd
is his
love to
costumes.
talk about Howard.
What was he like? I mean, I got a sense that this show's kind of autobiographical, actually.
Well, it is to a certain extent. Howard was really like the boy next door, actually. He was very, very Midwestern, very friendly and nice and clean cut, and but he just had this wacky side, and he had this gift for humor, visual humor, and humor that you wear, you know. And he and I met when we were working at La Cage aux Folles together. I was in the singing chorus, and he was in the wardrobe department. And we started working together. We actually did a nightclub act together, which I directed for him. And it was like an electric pairing. We both found in each other something that really sparked our own creativity.
When he was ill and you were doing this show, and then he passed away, was there a point where you thought, I can't go on without him? I mean,
well,
were you...
we were watching that clock. Certainly, when we conceived the show and when we started working on it, we thought he would play the part, as he had played himself in Whoopdeedoo.
Yes.
But it started to become apparent that he wasn't going to bounce back again. And no, I didn't. Certainly, I was worried about how we were going to complete the show and how long he'd hang on.
Right.
But and I had many sort of bedside, intense conversations with him about now, how are those feather boas going to pop out of that flower pot, and where does the spring go, and how, because I wanted to be sure that we could complete the vision, you know. But he was so scrupulous about communicating that it all went off without a hitch.
Well, your opening night must have been bittersweet, because you got wonderful reviews, but of course your co-creator was not there to enjoy them.
It was a very emotional night. We all felt like Howard was there, you know.
Now, what's next for When Pigs Fly? Do you envision little flying piglets going out there across the country and making you lots and lots of money?
That would be nice. I would love for the show to play around the country, because I think it has something to say. I think it's sort of a wonderful ambassador for gay people in general. Here in New York, it's not, you know, such a surprising issue, but out there in America, I think if we could get people to come see the show, I think it might even educate them a little bit while they were laughing.
Of course, what would you say, though, to, I imagine the Tony Kushners of the world, who are more political, who might say, this show shows off gay people as, you know, a bunch of show queens, essentially, who just want to sing and dance in Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals. Have you had that kind of criticism from any gay quarters?
I have not heard that from any gay quarters, and most of the gay people I know who have seen it, and Tony Kushner has been to see the show, and he loved it.
So there you go.
But
it's not as humorless as I thought.
But I did anticipate that reaction, and that's why I wrote a song called Laughing Matters, which is sort of the 11 o'clock spot, and it sort of addresses that issue. The guy who sings it starts out by saying, I know what you're thinking. Don't we know what's going on in the world? Is all this frivolity really called for? And then he sings a song about how important it is.
Because the answer is yes, and the reason Why Pigs Fly works is because it's a funny show. It's running at the Douglas Fairbanks Theater. Mark Waldrop, the co-creator, thanks a lot for being our guest on Theater Talk.
Thank you.
Well, happy Halloween, Michael Riedel. Do you have a Halloween story for me?
I have a scary thought. Arnold Schwarzenegger in The King and I. How does that grab you?
It's a puzzlement.
Believe it or not, in a brilliant exclusive in the New York Daily News by yours truly, I reported that Arnold Schwarzenegger has gone into talks with the Dodgers, prominent producers on Broadway, to star in The King and I. Now, the timetable, if he agrees to do it, he would go in the spring, replacing Kevin Gray, who's playing the King of Siam, the Yul Brynner role now. And do it for a limited run in the spring. These discussions were at a very, very tentative stage when
Roll your
when I blew him out of the water and
Yeah,
tipped the world
yeah.
off. I know that the producers were very concerned that because there was a lot of publicity surrounding this news, that he would back off. But I've since been told from some other sources over at The King and I that he has not backed off, that he's still interested in the show. He went to see it a couple of weeks ago, apparently liked it very much, met the director, Christopher Renshaw, and is seriously considering doing the show.
Now, it's a fabulous show, and it's a fabulous role, but this is a man who was a bodybuilder and has never, I think, done a play in his life.
Sure, I mean,
How
you know,
could he
shall we
consider-
dance, Arnold? It's sort of, can we dance, Arnold? I think that's the question.
I mean, he would sell tickets amazingly, but...
Yeah.
And, well, he's a man who's used to meeting all kinds
Well,
of
look, it would
demands,
be-
so
it
he
would-
guess he could do it.
Yeah, it would be the ultimate star casting.
Yes,
but,
yes.
you know, it would be interesting for the first few minutes. It'd be almost like a freak show having him up there in the Yul Brynner part. And then he would have to deliver the goods for 2 hours and 40 minutes, 8 shows a week. And that remains to be seen if he can do it, if he wants to do
Is it going to be with Faith Prince or Vanessa Williams?
it. Could be Faith Prince, but there's a rumor about Marie Osmond going in.
Oh, no.
I'm a
that-
little bit country and I'm a little bit muscle-bound.
They're
I guess it
kidding.
would
They're
be.
kidding. No offense, Marie, but I didn't see that one. All right. We'll
Stay
see.
tuned. We'll keep
Stay
you posted
tuned. We'll
on the
see you next
Schwarzenegger
time.
saga.
And now, The King and I.
They are sick.
But you do expect women to be faithful.
Naturally.
Why, naturally?
Because it is natural. It is like old Siamese rhyme. A girl must be like a blossom with honey for just one man. A man must live like honey bee and gather all he can. To fly from blossom to blossom, a honey bee must be free. But blossom cannot ever fly from bee to bee to bee.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.